What's up? What's going on, world of YouTube? This is RJ from Game News USA, back today with another top 10. And yes, it is a top 10 that's about video games for once. I know I went off the rails with some sports top 10s. It happens, but we're going to talk about the top 10 games from the 1990s. First, let me give some context. I'm wearing my 1990s jacket. This is a very popular 1990s typical jean jacket you would see back then, you know, in the grunge era where I'm from. And I'll say this, gaming was super influential in the 90s. Obviously, that's when I first started gaming, was in the 90s. And so this list is very nostalgic for me. And there's no rhyme or reason to this list. This is just my top 10 games from the 1990s. They have a very 90s feel to them. They're the games that I love from that era. And so I just want to jump right into it. You know, the Super Nintendo, the N64, the Sega Genesis, and the PlayStation 1 were extremely influential in building this list. So without further ado, let's jump right into it by talking about number 10, Doom. Doom was so ahead of its time. You absolutely had to have been there to see what it was like to play Doom from the jump. It was like nothing we'd ever quite seen before. And still holds up decently well, surprisingly. Number 9 on this list, Chrono Trigger. Often regarded as one of the greatest RPGs of all time. This game was phenomenal. I really would like a re-release, a remake, or a remaster of this game just to have an excuse to play it again. But super fun game. It had the art style from Akira Toriyama, who, if you don't know, he was the main guy who created Dragon Ball Z, so you gotta love that. Great story, and once again, love RPGs, so gotta be on the list. Number 8, GoldenEye 007. What do you think of, if you're old enough and you remember, when you think of the late 90s, Friday night with friends? Well, you think pizza, Mountain Dew, Doritos, and some GoldenEye 007. Campaign was fine, but where it was all at was the multiplayer. On that little 26-inch television, standard definition, split 4 ways. No screen peeking allowed. But we all did it. What a nostalgic feeling it is to go back and play GoldenEye 007. Didn't hold up quite as well, in my opinion, but for what it did in the era that it was, you know, pre-Call of Duty, pre-Halo, you know, it really changed the game for multiplayer shooters for sure. Number 7 on the list is Final Fantasy VII. An RPG that is slightly better than Chrono Trigger, in my opinion. It had an amazing story and characters, memorable characters and villains, and was huge as far as pushing people away from Nintendo more to PlayStation, because, as you guys probably know, that game was originally maybe going to come to the N64, but it didn't work because PlayStation was using CD-based technology. It allowed for more room for the game to actually be on there. And so they went on the PlayStation instead. Up to that point, Final Fantasy 1 through 6 had been on Nintendo. This was a big game changer. It did lead to the PlayStation 1 outselling the N64 3-1. It effectively killed Sega, because Sega, who was in second place behind Nintendo prior to this with the Genesis versus the Super Nintendo, had its sales cut significantly. And the Saturn didn't quite have the games up to snuff, in my opinion. Led to the Dreamcast and eventual departure of Sega from the console manufacturing sphere. So, yeah, kind of a big deal. I think Final Fantasy VII you could kind of point to that. That's like PlayStation's big claim to fame for getting going. Kind of like Super Mario Bros. Is for the NES and Nintendo. Or Halo is for Xbox and Microsoft. So, number 6 on the list, Sonic 3 and Knuckles. That game, best Sonic 2D game ever for sure. It's the one I had to go with here. Love the old school Sonic games a lot. Newer school Sonic games, not so much. It's a little mid. But that was peak 2D Sonic. That was peak Sega, probably. So it's got to be on the list, number 6. Number 5. I do think this is a better 2D platformer. Donkey Kong Country 2. And speaking of platformers, I love platformers. I love the games that they put out in the 80s. But the 90s, they really nailed it down with the best platformers. And this won't be the last platformer on the list. It certainly wasn't the first. But Donkey Kong Country 2 had this unique co-op ability where you could get hit and then the second player comes in and plays. So that was actually a really nice little touch, nice little add. That, you know, if you have a brother or a sister and you're playing that the other person could get involved. It's something that Mario hadn't done before. It's something that Sonic hadn't done before. And actually, since then, it's mostly been two players actually on screen together who might bump into each other and stuff. Like the new Super Mario Bros. Series. But it was a unique, kind of neat way of doing co-op. But also the level design took what Donkey Kong Country, the original, did and improved on it vastly and dramatically better, in my opinion. The music in this game was top tier. You guys have heard me use aquatic ambience a lot before in my backgrounds. And that's because the composer did a fucking fantastic job. So shout out to that. The visuals were super amazing made by Rare. It was honestly their masterpiece in my opinion. And, I mean, for a late-gen Super Nintendo game, this thing looked magnificent. And next up, we got Mario Kart 64. It's one of my favorite Mario Kart games, and that's saying something because I love Mario Kart. And for the longest time, it was my favorite until Mario Kart 8. But that transition from what the Super Nintendo brought, which I didn't make the list on here for that, to this 3D space to drive around in Mario Kart 64 was tremendous. It really gave you the feel of 3D driving in a Nintendo game for the first time, basically. And the tracks were phenomenal. The tracks are so memorable. They keep putting them into Mario Kart 8 and other Mario Karts. I could name them all right now if I really wanted to. You know, Peach's Castle, Bowser's Castle, Royal Raceway, Toad's Turnpike, Wario Stadium, Mario Raceway, Luigi's Raceway, Toad's Turnpike, like Choco Mountain. These are some of the best courses we've ever seen in a Mario Kart game. And that's what really made it awesome. You know, adding items like the blue shell, having 3 red shells around you or 3 green shells around you. You know, I can go on for this game for days, but we got a whole list to get through, guys. Number 3 on this list, this is some people's greatest game of all time. Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. You know, what hasn't already been said about this game? It's, in my opinion, yes, you know, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are out there. This is Link's most memorable adventure. When people think about Link's adventuring, they think about this game. Number 2 on the list. I know it's in the thumbnail. I know it's in the music, so you thought maybe it's number 1. But I do have a game that's number 1 that you all probably could guess. But number 2 on the list is Super Mario 64. Literally blew my mind. When I saw this game for the first time, I turned to a friend of mine when I was young and I said, graphics will never be better than this. I mean, yeah, it didn't age the best because the camera controls weren't the greatest, but this game is phenomenal. It really set the tone for 3D Mario, 3D platforming, and pretty much 3D gaming as a whole. You could probably cite this as either the most important game ever, or at least the second most important game ever, along with the original Mario Bros. Because it established so much. And you know what? It still holds up. It's still my favorite 3D platformer. It is. I'd rather play it than Mario Odyssey, and I love Mario Odyssey. I would rather play it than Galaxy, or Galaxy 2, or Sunshine. And that's crazy, because the game is, at this point, is nearly 30 years old. And I'll be playing it forever. I'll be buying it on every Nintendo system that it ever comes out for, and playing it like it's brand new all over again. But there's one other game on this list, guys. There's one game that takes the cake. Anytime there's a chance to involve this game, it's always number one on my list. That's Super Mario World. Like, yes, it's very early in the 90s. Technically, I could have counted Super Mario Bros. 3 also. But I chose to go with this 2D Mario game. What I haven't already said about Super Mario World. Like, the level design, the secret exits, the boss battles, the power-ups, the eye-popping, colorful graphics. Still the best video game of all time to me. Still the one game I'd play on a desert island forever. So, that's got to be number one. So, what do you guys think? Is there any games from the 1990s that you enjoyed? Let me know in the comments below. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And thank you all for watching. Peace. Have a good one. I'm out.